Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in our future problem-solving community. We are so glad you are here with us. My name is April Mickley, and I am the Executive Director here in Melbourne, Florida for the International Office of Future Problem Solving. We've had several series before this one. Today's session is going to focus on editing and revision. While we did try to host these series before, all of our affiliate competitions had their scenario writing competition. We just simply ran out of time. So if you already had to submit your scenario and weren't able to attend in time, we apologize. And we aim to have a calendar and a schedule for the next competition season that will be even more improved than we were able to do this year. Just a brief background on scenario writing. You might be joining us new to scenario writing and already thinking about getting involved next year. Scenario writing is a competitive component, and it is for individual competitors. This is not a team event like some of our other competitive items that we have. The students construct short stories of 1,500 words or less. And they compete against writers in their same age group. So the junior division is grades 4 through 6, the middle division grades 7 through 9, and the senior division grades 10 through 12, or the equivalent of those grades if you're not, if you have a different grade system in your country. The students are asked to set their story at least 20 years in the future. And it should be a very imagined, but a very logical outcome of the research and the actions that are taking place in the world today. And they should be connected to one of the 5 topics of the year. And these are the Northern Hemisphere topics that are being worked on at this time: terraforming, youth and competitive sports, wearable technology, human environmental impact, and personalized medicine. And these topics change every year, and they are actually voted on by students. Our topic voting is open now. So on a side note, if you're interested in taking part in selecting topics, you can log on to our website and find out all about that. If you need more information on scenario writing as a whole, it is located on our website. There are samples there. There is information on how to get you started. We invite you to visit that website as well. I'd like to introduce our speakers today and welcome them back. They've been very excited and supportive of this scenario writing webinar series. We honestly couldn't do it without them. They both have been scenario coaches and evaluators. They have had scenario winners at both their state and international levels. And they are also authors. Each year they write the Future Problem Solving Topic Activity Unit books, and they have also written a publication called Power Up Your Creative Mind. That teaches a lot of the creative thinking skills, including brainstorming, the category list, and Scamper. But their latest publication that they created is the one we're featuring today. And this publication is Into the Future, a kid's guide to the process of scenario writing. So this is specifically written for students and coaches who are working with the students. Without further ado, welcome Kathy and Elaine. Thank you for being with us. And we are excited to hear what you have to say today.
Glad to be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the show is about to start. Please silence your cell phones and locate the nearest Zoom exit. So sit back and enjoy the show. Lights, camera, editing and revision, action.
Well, our navigation guide shows us that the setting for this scene is, oh Oh, Kathy, we're headed for the dreaded vortex of editing and revision. As the editing and revision process begins, you might feel just like that. You might feel like you're falling into a black hole. You've worked so hard to finish the scenario, and now you're being asked to pick it apart. Unbelievable. But Tracker advises, take time to edit and you will see your scenario will become the best it can be.
So let's give a big welcome to some scenario editing and revising characters. And as you see the next slide, visualize which personality might represent you. Who are you most like?
Lots of different personalities. Coaches, you might recognize some of them. But we'd like you to look at these and decide if you are any of those. Just giving you a few minutes to think. And then we'd like you to share whichever one you decided you are in the chat.
Is it possible to be like two of them? For instance, can I be partly a Patty perfectionist and also a long-winded Lucy together?
Oh, absolutely. That'll only give you a headache. I know some kids, when they're first starting out, are like helpless hyenas because they just have a fear of getting started, and so they think, I can't do this, I'm not even going to try. They can't break it down into small parts, and so they just kind of give up and wait for the teacher to give them all their ideas.
Elaine and I have had all of these students. That's how we developed them in our book, thinking about the way that our students reacted when they were doing scenarios.
So we have
Especially
some
the editing
comments.
processes.
We have some comments in the chat. We have someone who's admitted to being similar to Paul paralysis. We have someone working at a level of autonomous Annie. Someone else mentioned, I'm probably a Patty, but I'd like to be like Annie. Someone else is working at the autonomous Annie level. Someone else has mentioned an eloquent Earl. We have a long-winded Lucy with us. We have a good enough Gary. Looks like we're very well represented.
We've got their numbers. Okay. Has everyone had a chance to respond?
We had a couple more come in, very similar, being admitting to being more like of a Gary. 2 people said Gary, and someone says they think like Annie.
They think like Annie. Well, if you haven't figured it out already,
we have
autonomous enemy is the role you want to play. If you want to achieve the most from your scenario editing and revision time, you need to actively seek relevant advice and be willing to change things to make your story better. So what we want you to do now is think for a minute about what you might do to become more like autonomous Annie in any of your writing endeavors, especially scenario writing. And you can shout that out, but you need to unmute yourself first.
You should listen to your teachers when they give advice.
That's a good advice. More?
Be able to take constructive criticism without letting it affect you.
Definitely. All right, so we're going to go on to scene 2. And in scene 2, I'm introducing Corey Fraser Morgan. And Corey was a scenario writer back when she was in middle school. And she took a lot away from the scenario writing process and went into writing as a career. She's taught college, she's worked for and written for advertising agencies, and now she has a business of her own called inklingcreative.net. So let's hear it for Corey.
Well, thank you so much for having me today. Correction, it's actually Inkling Creative Strategies.
Oh.
But that's fine. So yeah, as Kathy mentioned, I am a former scenario writing competitor. And I was honored to win, I think, second place at states and offered the opportunity to go to IC. It was probably one of the highlights of my writing when I was in high school. And it opened a lot of doors for me to learn some skills that I still use today in the many opportunities that I've had as a professional writer. So I think the biggest thing is that scenario writing challenges you to tell a story in a very compact box. You're given certain limitations in terms of the words. You have a very specific prompt that you have to address in terms of thinking about the topic and making relevant connections that could play a role in the future, and crafting a story to fit within those particular rules. So I don't know how many people here, students in particular, are looking to be writers in the future, but one trend that I'm seeing now in my industry that is going to be playing a role for sure in the future is that writing is becoming smaller and smaller. I don't know if you've heard of flash fiction. It's short stories that actually are about the length of scenarios. That's becoming very popular. I've worked in, as Kathy mentioned, marketing, and you guys have 1,500 words for your scenario. Sometimes when I write things for marketing, I have 50 words. If I'm going to write a headline, I might have 5 words. And you have to be able to select just the right combination of words that portray a message, just like what you're doing now forces you to think about your message within a confined span of words. So that is, I think, the biggest takeaway that I've had from doing scenario writing is the challenge of the creative and critical thought process that you have to develop something into a piece of writing that somebody is going to read that will impact them. And I'm going to talk about thinking about your audience in just a minute, but that's something that I think doing scenarios really helps you to do. So those of you that are students that are taking part in this, get ready for a really great experience. And it is as fantastic an experience as you want to make it. And making it that way really starts with being willing to think critically and cognitively about what you've written. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about the writing process today in terms of revision. And the thing that I think a lot of writers don't really get about the process is that revision, editing, and proofreading are actually 3 completely different things. A lot of people, especially when I've taught college, go to look at each other's papers and make comments on them, and they immediately start dotting I's and crossing T's and putting in comments and saying, oh, you spelled this wrong. And all of that stuff is great. But when you're in the revision stage, that's not really what you need to be focusing on. Revision is getting the content right. It's really about thinking about the big picture of your story and the elements of a story that are going to make it engaging for readers. These are going to be things like characterization. You know, what is the arc of your character and how they change? In the scenario, working with that small word count that I was talking about a minute ago, you have to be able to craft a character arc that is going to show how the issue you're writing about changes them. So they become a very different person by the end of the story than they were at the beginning. You also have to think about the message that you want to send. What do you want to tell people about the topic that you've chosen, and how the trends that you're seeing right now could evolve into something quite serious that could really impact people in the future? And ultimately, you have to think about the fact that scenario writing is a genre. So if you think about genres, which is just a big fancy word for the conventions that categorize different types of writing, just like there are certain rules for writing horror stories or writing sci-fi, there are certain conventions or characteristics that scenario writing has. So that plays a role in it being futuristic and looking at the trend in the present day and projecting it realistically into the future. Writing something that is futuristic while still making it believable. You don't want to get too out there. It needs to be a realistic trajectory from the present into the future, like April was saying at the beginning. So you need to be thinking about all of these things. And when you are revising, those are the issues that you need to be looking at. It's about the big picture. It's not about how many grammar errors do I have. It's about, are all of the elements that I'm going to be scored on in place? And that's where looking at the rubric can actually play a really great role in you being able to think about how well things are working. So one of the participants that shouted something out about autonomous Annie a second ago mentioned constructive criticism. And I just want to speak to that in terms of the revision process. It's really important as you are revising that you are able to emotionally disconnect yourself from what you wrote. I know as a younger writer, it was really easy for me to get emotionally attached to things that I wrote. And Elaine was saying at the beginning about when you enter the vortex of revision, it's a scary thought to think, wow, I just put all of this work into writing this thing, and now you're asking me to tear it apart. But that is really an essential part of the process. And being able to listen to your coach and your classmates and people that are going to be giving you feedback is really critical. They want to help you. They don't want to be tearing down your writing or telling you that you're a bad writer or making you feel awful about your abilities. Everything that they say, as people that are very familiar with scenario writing, is designed to help you. So it's really important that you're able to think from a critical perspective and get outside of your work so that you can craft a story that is going to have the impact on people that you want it to. So that's revision. When you think about editing, this is looking at your story on a line level. That is, do the sentences make sense? Have you included the right amount of detail so that the world that you're building is very evident to readers? Remember that you are crafting a very specific world that you need to be able to put readers into. You need to help them imagine their way into what the future is going to be like within your story. So have you included enough detail to accomplish that? Do the sentences flow well? So do they make sense, not just in terms of how a good sentence goes together, but does each sentence flow into the next in terms of that compact structure that you're working in? And then finally, there's proofreading, which is where you look at the grammar and spelling mistakes, checking punctuation, making sure everything is spelled correctly. And you do that absolutely last. When I read people's work within my business, because that's something that I do, is I look at manuscripts that people submit to me and I make comments on them. I don't correct a single spelling error or grammar mistake until their final draft. I just look at the big picture of the issues. And I challenge you to do that as well as you are working through what you want to create for your story. So as far as those three elements, I think that is what is essential to understand. I know that it can be a difficult process. I know that for most writers, it's not the part of the process they most look forward to. They like writing a first draft and they love seeing a final copy, but this is really where the meat of all of the work comes in. And I can tell you right now that having coached numerous college students and having been a coach for scenario writing myself in some capacity, it really is the most essential process of getting to that point where you're ready to have a judge and having other readers look at it.
Thank you, Corey.
That was awesome. Okay, welcome to scene 3. Pay close attention to the director's notes in this section. We're going to give you some tips that will ensure that your scenario is an award-winning production.
And the first key to an award-winning scenario is to take a look at the rubric. You can't edit if you don't know what you're looking for. And so you want to begin with the end in mind. And if you take that rubric and go all the way to the exemplary column, that will give you a good head start.
That's right. It's time for a metacognitive moment. Did you know that our brain plays a big part in the editing process? Well, you might think of it as in a critical thinking form, but it also plays tricks on us when we write, which isn't a very good characteristic when you're trying to edit. It makes obvious mistakes invisible to us. That's why when you try to edit your own work, sometimes mistakes are there that you can't believe you missed. That's because the brain is the original autocorrector. You know how when you type something and you ask the computer automatically corrects it for you? Well, sometimes that's not in our best interest because it doesn't allow you to see what's actually there. So when we're editing, we need to look at our writing in a way that goes against everything the brain does when it looks at words. We need to actually edit without using our brain. And so coming up are some ways that we might use to allow yourself to bypass that brain's autocorrection mode and find those mistakes.
So give yourself the gift of time. And that means starting your scenario writing early so that you really do have time to set it aside and then pick it back up a little later and take a look at it with new eyes. Like Corey said, have that emotional separation from it. And that can only be accomplished if you can give yourself a little time away from it.
Okay, so now we're going to give you some life-saving techniques that play a supporting role in your editing and revision efforts. The first one is, and if you've been using the screen and on-screen online typing method for your scenario, then make a paper copy. And you might even change the font that you've been used to looking at. This will allow your brain to get a new view of the work at hand. And then read the scenario from the bottom of the page and from right to left, if that's how you're, and left to right, if that's how you're used to reading. If you're used to reading right to left, read it from left to right and from the bottom of the page up. Again, a new view for your brain. A third one is to, just like actors do, read your story out loud or have someone read it out loud to you. And you'll notice that there are some places that maybe the reader trips. You might even trip over your own words. And those places where we have those tripping things is a good spot to re-look at those words and maybe refine your language. And the last one is to use a ruler. Oh, my ruler disappeared. Use a ruler, and as you edit, underline each line that you read. That'll help you to get it to focus in on the words at hand. Those are 4 really good techniques. Some might work for you, some might not, but give it a try. It might help you out.
And the next one is shine a light on the editing and revision process. And by this, we mean you should seek constructive feedback. So ask your coach for sure. Maybe you have friends who are really good writers, your English teacher, would be a good person to ask. And so seek constructive feedback. Ask them, what's working in my scenario really well? Or is there something that isn't working? Are there lapses in logic, or are some of my words vague? Is there anything in the story that's confusing to you? And can you tell me what the message of my scenario was? What did I leave you thinking about?
Okay. This is really an important one. Show, don't tell. It's probably one of the most important rules or tips that we can give you. In the scenario, every single word counts. So as you edit, change passive verbs to vivid verbs that have motion and attitude. So like instead of saying Patrick was cold, say Patrick shivered as the temperature dropped. Did she say something or did she scream it? Did he walk into the room or did he storm into the room? We want you to use metaphors and similes, but use them sparingly and try to avoid cliches that sound like she was as sharp as a tack or she was dumb as a doorbell. Those don't give the reader the most appropriate image or the most clear image of what you want to say.
And the next one, and I hope you all do this, is listen to your coach and consider your coach's advice. Your coach has been trained in the scenario writing process, can help you with the details of your plot, can help you clarify your message, develop your characters. And I suggest that you use Google Docs or a program format like that, where you can go in anytime and leave your students comments on their writing. And that works really well for my students and myself.
Well, be on the lookout for some fatal errors. At least they've been fatal for my students when they show up in their scenarios. The first one is to avoid changing tenses from present to past or past to future. It's just really confusing and makes the story hard to follow. The other one is over dramatizing the dialogue or under dramatizing the dialogue. We want our characters to be real and believable, and we want to make a connection with them. And sometimes those over dramatizations make it just a little bit harder to connect. And the last one is when you punctuate dialogue, make sure that each time you have a different speaker, you put that into a different paragraph so that we can follow who's speaking and understand the flow of the story. So moving on.
So, let's make editing a little more fun and revising a little more fun. And so this is the wheels of names, which I scampered with and changed it to the wheels of editing. And I put a lot of the editing components from the rubric on the wheel. And if you go to wheels of names, you can make your own. Click on the little arrow, give it a spin, and see what you can focus on when you're writing your scenario. Round and round we go. All right, focus on your formatting. So a way to make editing a little more fun.
And finally, we want to say that's a wrap, but we want you to use a tool that is a very powerful for inspiration and motivation in your editing and revision process. Picture yourself at your affiliate bowl or even at IC. Hear your name called out to receive an award. Feel that heavy trophy in your hand. See the flash of the cameras as your picture is taken and your coach comes in to give you a big hug. The applause you hear rings out from the admiring audience. Congratulations, you are an award-winning scenario writer, and it's all because you allowed yourself to complete the editing and revision process, all because you went the distance.
Well, we would like to give a special thank you to two people. One is our artist, Brittany Travelli, and her information, if you ever need an artist to work with, is on the slide to the left. And we'd also like to thank Corey for all of her advice. Corey, would you like to, I know you work with high school students and middle school students. Would you like to say something really fast about your company?
Sure, I'd love it. So, Inkling Creative Strategies, our mission is to empower writers to reach their creative potential by providing mentorship, resources, and community for them to accomplish that. And one thing that I'm really excited about that we have as part of our services is mentorship for high school students. So when I founded my company last year, I realized that there is a special need right now with many schools being closed to give students an opportunity to develop their creative skills. So I offer anywhere from 6 to 9 week mentorship courses. This can be for creative writing. It can also be for things like college application essays. There are a lot of needs that students have right now in terms of developing their writing. And I really particularly enjoy working with that age group. So in addition to that, I also offer editing, consulting on books, reviewing manuscripts. Basically, if it involves language, it's something that I do. So you can reach me at Corey@inklingcreative.work by email or visit my website, inklingcreative.work.
Thank you,
for
Corey.
having me.
Thank you, Corey.
And thank you to the team for offering such an informative session today. We have provided so many extra tools that students can utilize, knowing that it's probably impossible to use all of the tools, but the great thing about a toolbox is it's there. There's lots of items available in the toolbox to help you with your writing. It's up to you to pick and choose. Whether you submit a scenario to the International Scenario Writing Competition or you simply enjoy creating stories for your own reading pleasure, we certainly hope that this session has been informative, has been helpful, and we just so appreciate all of the creative efforts of our students and the adults that are there to guide their way. We're signing off for the last scenario session for this competition season. Be on the lookout for more sessions in the coming months. Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
I have a really quick question. Could I ask?
Absolutely.
So I have, so I've like, for my ending of my scenario, I've had like a couple different endings that I've been exploring and like trying to work with, but I wasn't sure, is it better to have an ending that ends like all wrapped up like with a solution, or should it like be more ambiguous?
Either way works. I've talked to my students about that, and it's like, you don't want it just to feel like the person got tired of writing and so they stopped. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to leave the reader satisfied that the story is at a good, solid conclusion. I don't know.
And it might be thinking about what's your message. What would you say, Corey?
Yeah, I think also it comes together with character arc, and that's where knowing who your character is and the journey you want to take them on comes into play. So what I think about is, who is this person when the story starts? And what are their values? What's important to them? What do they want to achieve? But how does this conflict that they face as a result of the way that things are in the world that you're making, how does that change them by the end? So I guess what I would do if it was my story is figure out how you want them to change and what you want them to learn. And ultimately, from an outside of the character point of view, what do you want your message to be? And then write from that standpoint for your ending. I really love the idea of writing more than one ending. That's actually a really great exercise that I encourage clients to do. So I would think about your ending options and think about which one best reflects the character arc of your story.
I know I always tell my students that your scenario ending could be a warning of what might come, or it might be a solution, giving people ideas that these problems and challenges can be solved, and we don't have to live with this future I'm creating.
Another thing that I've seen, having read people's scenarios, I think I judged one year and I coached a couple of people. But one thing that I noticed in a lot of these that I've read is that the character often at the end takes a very decisive action. And I wish I could remember exactly what her topic was. Actually, no, I do remember. A friend of mine in high school wrote one where it was actually kind of prophetic. In her story, everybody had these little devices that they typed to each other on, and nobody was talking out loud. Everybody just had these little computers, and I can't remember the topic, but that was how they communicated. And by the end of the story, the character discovered exactly how people were being hurt by this. And there was a line in it where she said, "I can't do this anymore." And the line was, her voice crackled from disuse. And at the end, she takes out the earpiece or whatever that's a part of this, throws the device down, and disconnects herself from everything. So I think often the ending causes the character, now that they know something about the world they live in that they didn't know before, it causes them to take a very decisive action. And I don't know, like that was my friend's scenario that she wrote that year, and that's always stayed in my mind. So I mean, I don't know, like as a reader, this was over 20 years ago that she wrote this, and it's still in my head. So that's something to think about as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Good luck.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Have a good day.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks, ladies. And thank you so much, Corey, for joining us. You just added the extra level of awesomeness to this already great
Yes, you
series.
did.
So I really appreciate it.
Glad to help. It's a great program, and it certainly took me a long way to having skills that I need. I think it's very essential for people to participate.